It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce Jamal Rahman. I first met Iman Raman at the Dawn of Interspirituality conference in Costa Rica. And he is a force for good. And in that force for good, he has dedicated his life to be in service to all of humanity. He is and has the Interfaith Community Sanctuary in Seattle and is adjunct faculty at Seattle University. He is a teacher. He is an author. He is also part of the Interfaith Amigos, a traveling band of 3 who travel internationally, which also include Rabbi Ted and Pastor Don. And they also work with the 3 Amigos, who also are in South America. So these Interfaith Amigos, Iman being one of them, continue to spread this word of harmony and love for all of life. He is an author of many, many books, 7 in total, written and co-authored. One of them here is Finding Peace Through Spiritual Practice, and the Interfaith Amigos are a part of that one. And here's one that I love, The Sacred Laughter of the Sufis, because I think it's important to laugh. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jamal Rahman.
My friends, thank you so much for that gracious welcome. This is my 2nd pilgrimage here, and it's a joy and privilege to be in this sacred place of unity and beauty. So today I wanted to just make some comments on some questions which arose from some focus groups of different ages, genders, different social backgrounds, who were asked one overarching question: what are some spiritual questions that really are arising from within you? So for example, one of them is, who am I? It's a very common question. Who am I? I know that some of you know Rumi, the 13th century sage, who has this wonderful utterance. Rumi mostly just would go into a trance and words would just pour out of him. So his utterance is, you are a ruby. You are a ruby in the midst of granite. You are a ruby in the midst of granite. How long will you continue to deceive us? For we can see the look in your eyes. So please return to the root of your real self. So essentially, in practical terms, you and I, we have a personality. And I love best the definition by the Buddha. What is a personality? Nothing more, says the Buddha, than a bundle of conditioned reactions to life's circumstances. Nothing more than a bundle of conditioned reactions to life's circumstances. But you and I are much more than that. We have within us also that divine spark, our Christ nature, Buddha nature, Elohim nature. How do we connect to that? Prophet Muhammad was asked this. He said, know thyself. Know thyself, and you shall know thy sustainer. That Christ nature, Elohim nature, Krishna nature within you. He also said, die before you die. Die to all that is false within you before you die a physical death. If you think this is all just mystical talk, not very practical, consider the fact that in Japan, there's a particular group consisting of Nobel laureates, scientists, atheists, agnostics, homeless, high social status, gathering together and really discussing what is it we need to do to tackle these extensive, phenomenal global issues that we have, social justice, earth care, and they came up with something called the Fuji Declaration. And the first sentence is, what is critical that we have to do is to awaken to the divine spark which exists within every single human being and to live by its light in every aspect of our life. So just allow that to perfume your heart. Who am I? Another question was, what is a divine or beautiful value I can live my life by? So for me as a Muslim, Prophet Muhammad said, that all the teachings of the Quran can be summarized in the opening chapter of the Quran, which is called Surah Fatiha. And that entire teachings of the first chapter is contained in something called Basmallah, which opens virtually every one of those 114 chapters of the Quran. And what is the Basmallah? Bismillahir-Rahman-ir-Rahim. In the name of God, who is boundlessly compassionate, infinitely merciful. And when a Bedouin asked the Prophet Muhammad, what is the secret to this Basmallah? What is the secret to living a life of contentment, meaning, fulfillment, joy? And the Prophet Muhammad famously said, be compassionate with yourself and be compassionate with others. Poetry, I'm from South Asia. There's a wonderful poet named Tagore who wrote that not hammer strokes, but the gentle dance of the waters sings the pebbles into perfection. Rumi has a wonderful verse. How should spring bring forth a garden on hard stone? Become earth, so you may grow flowers of many colors. For Jamal, you have been a heart-breaking rock. Just once, for the sake of experiment, become earth. So just be with that. Am I, in my life, compassionate with myself? Essentially, that's the key. This wonderful saying from Lao Tzu in Tao Te Ching, a very critical verse. Compassionate towards yourself. Compassionate towards yourself, you reconcile all beings in the world. You want peace in your family, in your community, in your nation, globally. The first step and the most important step, compassionate towards yourself. You reconcile all beings in the world. Okay, third question that came up with people. What am I doing here? Why am I here? What's my purpose of my existence on planet Earth? There's a wonderful revelation that came to the Prophet Muhammad in a dream where God said, I was a secret treasure. Spirit said, I was a secret treasure and I longed to be known. And so I created you and the worlds, visible and invisible. So just be with that saying that really Sufis or mystical Muslims, they rhapsodize over. I was a secret treasure and I longed to be known. And so I created you and the worlds, visible and invisible. So no matter how fulfilled we feel with our material wants, there is within us a longing, and we don't know what that longing is. A very beautiful 8th century, the most famous, most beloved female sage in Islam named Rabia. She would cry out, "There is a disease in my breast. There's a disease in my breast no doctor can cure. There's a disease in my breast no doctor can cure. Only union with that friend can cure it." Or Rumi, his poetry. There is a kiss we want. There is a kiss we want all our lives. There is a kiss we want all our lives, a touch of spirit on the body. Anyhow, to summarize, if you look at all the traditions, why are we here? If you look at the different religions, they say 2 reasons. One is to evolve into the fullness of your being, to become more Christ-like, Buddha-like, Elohim-like, Allah-like. You don't have to become a prophet or a saint, but a better human being. And secondly, to be of service to God's creation. As Rumi says, to be a lamp, a lifeboat, or a ladder to others. I love to repeat again and again that wonderful poetry of Tagore who says, or who wrote, "I slept and dreamt life was," do you remember the particular verse? Life was joy. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and found life was service. I served, and lo, service was joy. Okay, just be with that for a few moments. The next question which always comes up is there a God? Well, who knows? I love that wonderful insight by the Sufis who say, in the name of him who has no name, but who appears by whatever name you call her. In the name of him who has no name, but who appears by whatever name you call her. I love the Hindu description about mystery, about God, Brahman. The eyes cannot see it, but it is that by which the eyes see. The tongue cannot utter it, but it is that by which the tongue utters. The mind cannot think it, but it is that by which the mind thinks. So it's very foolish to try to describe God, as the Buddhists, when they talk about mystery, they say, trying to understand the mystery is like using a bamboo pole to measure the depths of the ocean. It's not possible. So God is absolute mystery, but what amazes me is that the greater mystery is even something more than that. And I just want to tell you that, as I work with my congregation and I see some clients, I've had some clients who've said, I really want to work with you on one condition. Never mention the word God. Because they have been so savaged by life circumstances. There's one lady whose daughter was murdered. Another lady who was incested. A third one from Africa whose father was a politician and he was thrown off the helicopter because he opposed the government. So I worked with them, and they did the work of healing and empowerment and transformation, and through their own volition, after doing some work of healing particularly and empowerment, these same people have now become the most ardent devotees of God. In fact, whenever I meet them, I'm scared to meet them because they always keep talking about God, 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 God. In Pakistan, there's a language called Urdu, and there's a Sufi saying, Allah hame Allah walo se bachaye. The song means, oh God, save me from all these God lovers. There's a wonderful true story of a Bedouin, which kind of describes this mystery of God. A Bedouin was asked, "Do you believe in God?" And the Bedouin said, "You mean that God who sent me poverty, afflictions, made me wander from country to country to country?" But as he spoke, he entered into a state of ecstasy. He entered into a state of ecstasy. There's a wonderful Rumi poem about a man who always was so pious, always praying. His lips grew sweet with that praise. But one day a skeptic said, but have you ever heard a reply back from God? And that question pierced his heart. And he gave up praying, no more praying. And after some time, a messenger came from God. It's called Khidr in Islamic tradition. "Why aren't you praying?" "Because this answer, 'Here I am,' never came." And then this messenger from God said, "I have this message from God who says this inner longing within you, this painful anguish you have for God is the return message. The sadness that you feel is the secret cup." He said, "Have you ever heard the whining and the moaning of a dog for its master? Have you ever heard a whining and the moaning of a dog for its master? That whining, that moaning is the connection." And the verse ends by saying, "There are love dogs. There are love dogs. There are love dogs no one knows the names of. Give your life to be just one of them." Okay, moving quickly. Another very deep question is, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do terrible things happen to innocent people? There's no answer. If you try to answer, it's foolish. But there's one insight I've loved very much, and I've shared it quite often, and I always get a lot of emails and cards and letters after that. In the Quran, there's a verse that says, before humanity came down to earth, God gathered all the unborn humanity and said, "Am I not your sustainer?" And we all heard God's voice and we said, "Yes, yes, yes, you are a sustainer." That's in the Quran. And then in the tradition, in the legend, it goes on to say that before humanity came down to Mother Earth, God took all of the unborn humanity to a cosmic tree, huge tree. And on the branches were packages. And God said, the world you're going to is a world of opposites. Nothing is clear without a polar opposite. Sugar is sweet in contrast to vinegar. You know joy because you also know sorrow. These packages, said God, these are packages of suffering. And some packages are small, some packages are medium, some are very large packages hanging on the limbs of trees. And he said, before you go down to earth, each one of you will have to take one of those packages. You can choose any one you want. The legend goes on to say the nobler ones, the more beautiful ones among us, they chose to take the larger packages so others would suffer less. So the insight is, when you see someone suffering, terribly, don't try to analyze it. Don't talk about karma at that instance. These are the ones who chose the larger packages. The Sufis say, just be grateful to these people and just serve them. Be of help to them. I just recently got a letter from someone whose wife has cancer, and he was furious with God. But he said, when I heard that insight, something softened my heart. And all I wanted to do was just be grateful to her and just to serve her. Do we need community? That's another question. Absolutely. A wall standing alone is useless. Add to it other walls, it can support a roof, even a granary. These are some of my favorite verses from Rumi. Only when ink joins with a pen can a blank paper say something. And we need relationships. I spoke on Friday at Banyan Bookstore. I was talking about these two studies about happiness and longevity. There's a very famous Harvard study, the longest study on happiness. What is the determinant of happiness? It turns out it also morphed into longevity. And the discovery was it was not money, it was not social status, it was not your genes, it wasn't even your good health. The number one determinant of happiness was having good relationships. Didn't have to be perfect, but relationships you can rely on. There's another study, a 7-year study from Brigham Young University in Utah, also on happiness and longevity, and they concluded with the same result. The number one factor, determinant, was relationships. But what was surprising, astonishing was number two factor was something called social integration. Part of it is, Jamal, how do you deal with those you meet casually? The teller at the bank, the checker at the grocery store. Do you connect with them even just casually? If you do, it does something to your brain, to your body, to your emotions, to your spirit. You're more happy in life. You live a longer life. So relationship, in fact, the conclusion of that study, and it's continuing, is happiness is all about relationships, relationships, relationships. Okay. Why do we need spiritual practices? Very quickly, I want to tell you, I'm thinking of one particular panel I was on racism, and this African American professor said, do you know, every 28 hours, an African American is being killed by state-sponsored violence. We were shocked. He said, that's not the real problem. The real problem is the African American is being murdered 1 billion with a B times a day. How? By all those conditioned biases, prejudices, stereotyping we have of the other. How do you get rid of that? How do you overcome that? How do you soften that? Yes, legislation is critical. Education is critical. But the real work is the spiritual practices to overcome my conditioning. Very quickly, there was a wonderful scientific advisor to President Carter on environment, and he said, I've realized that the biggest environmental problems are loss of biodiversity, climate change, ecosystem collapse. And I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could take care of it. But now I've realized the biggest environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And scientists cannot take care of that. We need spiritual practices. So another quick question is, give me just one or two spiritual practice. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. I don't have time. One which is critical is, can I practice, no matter for how long, simply silence every day? Just silence. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. You see, Rumi says, silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is the absence of the little self. He goes on to say, silence is the language of God. Everything else is a poor translation. Very quickly, once somebody asked the Prophet Muhammad, oh, sweet Muhammad, the legislation of the faith has become too complicated. Just give me one simple practice. And the Prophet Muhammad said, keep your tongue forever moistened with the name of Allah. You can choose any sacred verse and just repeat it in the course of your daily work. Just repeat it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. You might say, big deal. So what? There's a scientific reason to explain why it works. This is in every single tradition. You take a pot or a vat of dye, color. You put your cloth in the vat of dye, take it out. It has a beautiful color, but it fades away over time. But what happens if you take that cloth and dip it into the vat of dye again and again and again and again and again and again? There comes a time that color becomes permanent, color fast. So it really pays just to repeat a sacred mantra. You can just say, unity, 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 unity. It'll do something to you. It'll color you. Okay, lastly, and I'll end with that. I won't go into the questions, but all these questions are asked about the fear of death. What happens after death? What is death? So maybe I'll go with what the mullah says, He says, actually Prophet Muhammad said this, and the mullah paraphrased it. Prophet Muhammad said, here we are so scared that we shall go into non-existence. Jamal, you're scared that one day you'll go into non-existence. But the truth is, if the truth be known, non-existence is trembling in fear. It might be given human shape. And by the way, say the great mystics, when you go over to the other side and you look back at your life, Jamal, at all your dramas and melodramas, you will laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. So all the mystics say, why wait? Why not laugh right now? And the last verse I want to tell you is from Rumi, who says, Jamal, you have no idea of the joy the soul feels. You have no idea of the joy the soul feels in returning home. So its famous lines are, how marvelous was the way, Jamal, you quit the world. How marvelous was the way you quit the world, the way you ruffled your feathers and breaking free of your cage, you took off for your soul's world, a love-sick nightingale, among owls. A love-sick nightingale among owls, you caught the scent of the roses and flew to the rose garden. Thank you so much, my friends. Thank you. Thank you.